Minho's hands trembled as he carried the silver dessert tray toward table 7. The private dining room at the Lotus Garden was filled with dangerous men in expensive suits, all celebrating the engagement of the most feared man in Seoul, Dante Kwon. Minho had served important people before, but never anyone like this, never someone whose single glance could end a life. He carefully placed a delicate chocolate mousse in front of Yuna Park, Dante's fiancée. She was breathtaking in a red silk dress, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders. She smiled at Minho warmly, completely at ease among these predators. Dante sat across from her, his sharp suit perfectly tailored, the scar above his left eyebrow visible in the candlelight. "Congratulations again, boss," Ji-sung Baek said from the end of the table, raising his glass. The gruff 40-year-old man had been by Dante's side for 20 years. "To Dante and Yuna, may your marriage be blessed." Everyone raised their glasses. Minho stepped back, trying to be invisible as he'd been trained. He needed this job desperately. His younger brother's hospital bills were crushing him, and the Lotus Garden paid better than anywhere else. Tonight was the biggest event the restaurant had ever hosted. He couldn't afford a single mistake. But 30 minutes earlier, Minho had made a terrible discovery. While refilling water glasses at the corner booth, he'd overheard two men speaking in hushed tones. They wore suits like everyone else, but something about them felt wrong, out of place. Minho's instincts, sharpened by years of watching people, told him they didn't belong here. "Tomorrow night," one man had whispered. "The warehouse raid. Director Han confirmed it." Minho's blood had frozen. Director Han was the police chief, but everyone in Seoul knew he was as corrupt as they came. A raid on Dante's warehouse meant something big was happening. Then the second man had said the words that changed everything. Yuna's information was perfect. She even gave him his security rotation. Minho nearly dropped the water pitcher. He forced himself to keep moving, to finish pouring, to show no reaction, but his mind was racing. Dante's own fiancée was betraying him. The woman currently laughing at Ji-sung's toast was setting up the man she was about to marry. Now, as Minho stood in the private dining room, he faced an impossible choice. If he stayed silent and Dante discovered the betrayal later, people would die, probably including Minho himself for knowing and not speaking. But if he spoke up and was wrong, Dante would kill him for insulting his bride. And if he spoke up and was right, he'd be caught in the middle of a war between a mafia boss and corrupt police. He thought of his younger brother in the hospital, fighting for his life. He thought of his father who died 5 years ago because someone had betrayed him to criminals over a gambling debt. His father had trusted the wrong person, and it cost him everything. Minho couldn't watch it happen again, not even to someone like Dante Kwon. His decision made, Minho slipped into the kitchen. His hands shook as he grabbed a cloth napkin and a pen. He scribbled quickly, "Your fiancé sold you out. Kitchen, now, alone." He folded the napkin into a small square and returned to the dining room, his heart hammering so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Dante was listening to Yuna tell a story about an art gallery opening. She was animated, beautiful, completely convincing. Minho approached with the dessert wine, filling glasses around the table. When he reached Dante, he placed the bottle down carefully and in one smooth motion slipped the folded napkin directly into Dante's palm. Their eyes met for just 1 second. Minho saw something flicker in Dante's expression, surprise, then cold calculation. Dante's fingers closed around the napkin so tightly it began to tear, but his face remained neutral. He laughed at Yuna's story, took a sip of wine, and casually read the note beneath the table. Minho stepped back and continued serving, though he felt like he might vomit from fear. He watched from the corner of his eye as Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The mafia boss's hand rested on the table, his fingers drumming once, twice, 3 times.
a tell that something was very wrong. Yuna touched Dante's arm affectionately. "Are you all right, darling? You seem distracted." Dante smiled at Yuna, warmly, loving, just thinking about how lucky I am. He kissed her hand gently, but Min-ho saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he was studying her face like he'd never seen it before. Dante stood up smoothly, still smiling. "Excuse me for a moment. Business call." He walked toward the kitchen with measured steps, not rushed, not concerned, just a man stepping away from dinner. But Min-ho knew better. Everything was about to change. He slipped into the kitchen door, just as Dante turned to face him. Two bodyguards started to follow their boss, but Dante raised one hand, stopping them cold. The kitchen door swung shut. Dante and Min-ho stood alone among the stainless steel counters and hanging pots. The sounds of celebration continued in the dining room beyond. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. Dante's expression hadn't changed, but his voice was ice. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you're still breathing."
Chapter 2. The Kitchen Confession. Min-ho pressed his back against the cold steel counter, his legs barely holding him upright. Dante stood 3 feet away, perfectly still, like a snake deciding whether to strike. The kitchen staff had vanished the moment Dante walked in. They knew better to be present for whatever was about to happen. "I'm waiting," Dante said quietly. His calm voice was somehow more terrifying than shouting would have been. Min-ho swallowed hard. "The corner booth. 2 men in gray suits. They were talking about a raid on your warehouse tomorrow night." Dante's expression didn't change. "And?" "They said Director Han is coordinating it. The police chief." Min-ho's voice cracked. "But that's not why I gave you the note." "Then why?" Min-ho forced himself to meet Dante's eyes. "My father. 5 years ago, someone he trusted betrayed him over a gambling debt. They sold information about him to criminals. He died because of it. I was 19. I couldn't save him. I couldn't even warn him because I didn't know until it was too late." Dante watched him without speaking. "I don't know you. I know what you are, what you do, but I couldn't stand there and watch it happen again, not when I could stop it." Something shifted in Dante's posture. The cold calculation remained, but beneath it, Min-ho detected something like respect, or maybe just curiosity. "You have a brother in the hospital." It wasn't a question. Min-ho's blood chilled. How did Dante know that? But of course he knew. Men like Dante knew everything about everyone in their orbit. "Yes." Dante straightened his jacket, smoothing the wrinkles Min-ho's struggling had caused. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't speak to anyone. My man, Ji-sung, will come for you later." "Am I going to die?" Dante paused at the kitchen door. He didn't turn around. "Not tonight." Then he walked back into the dining room and Min-ho heard him laughing warmly at something Yuna said, as if nothing had happened, as if his world hadn't just shattered into 1,000 pieces. Min-ho sank to the floor, his back against the cold steel, and waited for whatever came next. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Café Blossom as Dante held the chair for Yuna. She smiled at him, radiant in a white sundress, completely unaware that he was studying every movement she made, every blink, every breath. "You're being so romantic today," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "First breakfast, now my favorite café. What's the occasion?" Dante smiled back, though his eyes remained watchful. Can't a man spoil his future wife? This was the cafe Min-ho had mentioned, the same one where Yuna had allegedly met someone and passed documents across the table. Dante had chosen it deliberately, watching for any sign of recognition or nervousness when they arrived. Yuna had shown neither. She'd walked in like she owned the place, comfortable and happy. Either she was innocent, or she was a better actress than he'd ever imagined. "I've been thinking," Dante said casually, stirring his coffee. "We should move up the wedding, get married on Jeju Island next week, just us and a few close friends." Yuna's eyes widened with surprise. Next week? That's so sudden. Life is short. Why wait? She bit her lip, considering. I would love that, darling, but maybe we should wait until after your big business deal closes. You've been so stressed about it lately. Dante's hand froze on his coffee cup. He hadn't mentioned any business deal to her. He had several operations running, but none that he'd discussed at home. So how did she know about a big business deal unless someone had told her? Unless she already knew about the warehouse raid. He forced himself to relax, to keep smiling. You're probably right. Better to focus on one thing at a time. Yuna nodded, looking relieved. After everything settles down, we can plan a proper wedding, something beautiful. Dante watched her sip her tea, her elegant fingers wrapped around the delicate cup. 6 months ago, he'd walked into an art gallery and seen her standing before a painting, completely absorbed. She'd looked up when he approached, and her smile had hit him like a bullet to the chest. He'd fallen hard and fast, believing he'd finally found someone pure in his dirty world. Now he wondered if that moment had been staged, if Director Han had placed her in his path like a beautiful trap. His phone buzzed, a text from Ji-sung. Confirmed, 2 undercover cops working for Director Han planted bugs in their motel room. They mentioned Yuna by name. She's the source. Dante's heart turned to stone in his chest. Part of him hoped Min-ho was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation. But there wasn't. The woman sitting across from him, planning their wedding, wearing his ring, was feeding information to his enemies. Everything all right? Yuna asked, noticing his expression. Just Ji-sung with business updates. Dante pocketed his phone. Nothing important. After breakfast, Dante told Yuna he needed to visit his mother's grave alone. It was a lie. His mother's death anniversary was 3 months away, but Yuna accepted it without question. She kissed his cheek and told him she'd see him at home tonight. Instead of the cemetery, Dante drove south toward Busan. 4 hours on the highway gave him time to think, to plan, to push down the rage boiling inside him. He needed answers before he could decide what to do with Yuna. Why would she betray him? What could Director Han possibly offer her that was worth this risk? Soo-jin's apartment was in a rundown building near the Busan docks. Yuna rarely talked about her younger sister, claiming they weren't close. Another red flag Dante had ignored. He knocked on the door. Footsteps shuffled inside, then silence. She was looking through the peephole. Open up, Soo-jin. I just want to talk. More silence, then locks clicking, one after another. The door opened to reveal a thin woman with frightened eyes. She looked like Yuna, but worn down, exhausted by life. Mr. Kwon, Yuna isn't here. I know. I came to see you. Terror flooded her face. She tried to close the door, but Dante's hand stopped it gently. I'm not here to hurt you. I need to know one thing. He paused, watching her tremble. What does Director Han have on your sister? Soo-jin's face crumbled, and tears spilled down her cheeks. In that moment, Dante knew the waiter had been right about everything. Soo-jin collapsed onto her worn sofa, sobbing into her hands. Dante stood in her small apartment, waiting patiently for her to find her words. The walls were thin, the furniture cheap. Yuna had never mentioned her sister lived like this. 3 years ago, Soo-jin finally whispered. Yuna was driving home late at night. She was exhausted from working double shifts at the gallery. A teenage boy ran into the street chasing a ball. She hit him. Dante felt his chest tighten. She killed him? Soo-jin nodded miserably. She panicked. She was so scared. She drove away and never told anyone. The police investigated but found nothing. The case went cold. She wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. Then, 6 months ago, Director Han showed up at her door with photos, witness statements, evidence linking her car to the accident. He blackmailed her. He gave her a choice: 15 years in prison for manslaughter and fleeing the scene, or help him take down Dante Kwan. Sujin looked up at him with desperate eyes. She didn't want to do it. She cried for days after meeting you. She said you were kind to her, different from what she expected. Dante turned away, staring out the dirty window at the Busan harbor. Ships moved slowly across the gray water. His mind processed everything, fitting pieces together into a complete picture. Yuna wasn't a willing traitor. She was a trapped woman making impossible choices. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it changed things. Director Han was the true enemy here. He'd manufactured this entire situation, using Yuna as a weapon against Dante. Does she love me? Dante hesitated. She calls me sometimes, crying. She says she's never been happier and more miserable at the same time. She says you make her feel safe, but she knows she's destroying you. Fresh tears fell. She does love you. That's what makes it so terrible for her. Dante left without another word. He drove back to Seoul through the night, forming a plan with each passing mile. By the time he reached the city, he knew exactly what to do. The next morning, he called Ji-sung and 3 of his most trusted men to a private meeting. They gathered in the back room of a restaurant Dante owned, away from listening ears. Ji-sung's face was hard with anger when Dante explained the situation. She betrayed you, Ji-sung growled. Reason doesn't matter. In our world, that means death. Director Han betrayed me. Yuna was his puppet. Cut the strings and the puppet falls free. You're thinking with your heart, not your head. I'm thinking like a businessman. Dante spread his hands on the table. Director Han expects me at the warehouse tomorrow night. He expects to find drugs, weapons, evidence that will put me away for decades. What if he finds something else instead? Ji-sung's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? We move everything out tonight. Every gram, every gun, every document. Then we fill the warehouse with different evidence. Financial records showing Director Han's corruption. Photos of him meeting with rival gangs. Recordings of his illegal orders. Everything we've collected on him over the years. Understanding dawned on Ji-sung's face. He walks into his own trap. Exactly. The raid happens, the police find nothing on me, but everything on their chief. The media gets copies at the same time. By morning, Director Han is finished. The other men nodded slowly, seeing the beauty of the plan. Ji-sung still looked troubled. And Yuna, she'll still confirm your location to them tonight. She needs to. If she suddenly stops cooperating, Director Han might suspect something. She has to believe I don't know. Her fear has to be real. That evening, Dante sat across from Yuna at dinner, watching her push food around her plate. She seemed distracted, pale. He knew why. Tomorrow night, she believed police would arrest him. She believed she was sending him to prison. Later, through their bedroom door, he heard her crying softly in the bathroom, his hands clenched into fists. Tomorrow, everything would change. For her, for Director Han, for all of them. The warehouse doors exploded inward at exactly midnight. 20 police officers flooded through the entrance, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Behind them, Director Han walked slowly, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Dante stood calmly in the center of the empty space, his hands raised in the air. Ji-sung waited beside him, equally relaxed. There were no crates of drugs, no stacks of lekins, no evidence of any crime, just rows of filing cabinets arranged neatly in the middle of the concrete floor. Director Han's smile faltered. This wasn't what he expected. "Good evening, Director," Dante said pleasantly. "Thank you for coming personally. I've prepared something special for your visit." Director Han recovered quickly, waving his officers forward. Search everything. Open every cabinet, every box. He's hiding the evidence somewhere. The officers spread out, opening drawers and pulling out files. Confusion spread across their faces as they examined the contents. One young officer looked at his partner with wide eyes. Another started photographing documents with his phone. "Sir," one officer called out nervously, "these aren't drug records. These are bank statements with your name on them." Director Han pushed through his men, grabbing a file from the nearest cabinet. His face went white as he read. Dante watched with satisfaction as the director flipped through page after page of evidence documenting years of corruption. Money transfers from police evidence rooms to offshore accounts, photos of secret meetings with rival gang leaders, recorded conversations ordering murders, witness statements from former associates willing to testify. "This is fake," Director Han sputtered. "He manufactured all of this." "Did I manufacture the video, too? The one showing you accepting $2 million from the Busan smuggling ring? My men are delivering copies to every news station in Seoul right now. By morning, your face will be on every screen in Korea." The officers started looking at Director Han differently. Some had worked with him for years, never knowing about his secret dealings. Others had suspected, but never imagined proof existed. The young officer continued photographing everything, building his own case. Director Han's hand moved to his gun. He pulled it free and aimed directly at Dante's chest. "You think you've won? I'll kill you right here and claim self-defense. You attacked me during the raid. Everyone will believe it." Ji-sung stepped forward, but Dante raised his hand, stopping him. He looked Director Han directly in the eyes, showing no fear. "You used an innocent woman's past to turn her into your puppet. You threatened Yuna with prison to get information about me. You exploited her guilt over a terrible accident to make her betray the man she loves. Everything you did to her is documented in those files. When people learn you blackmailed her, they'll know she was a victim, not a criminal." Director Han's hand trembled. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The officers watched their chief, waiting to see what he would do. The air felt thick, electric with tension. "Put the weapon down, sir," the young officer said quietly. He stepped forward, his own hand resting on his holster. "Everything is being recorded. Body cameras are running. Whatever happens next, everyone will see." Director Han looked around wildly. His officers had formed a loose circle, but they weren't protecting him anymore. They were containing him. The evidence against him was overwhelming. If he shot Dante, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. If he surrendered, his career was over anyway. Slowly, painfully, Director Han lowered his gun. His shoulders slumped in defeat. The young officer stepped forward and gently removed the weapon from his hand. Another officer produced handcuffs. "Director Han, you are under arrest for corruption, extortion, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." As they led him toward the door, Director Han turned back to look at Dante with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Dante replied simply. Camera flashes erupted outside as news crews captured the disgraced police chief being walked to a patrol car. Dante stepped into the night air, a free man. His phone buzzed with a message from Yuna. "I heard what happened. I don't understand. Why did you protect me?"
The pier stretched out into dark water, waves crashing softly against wooden posts. This was where Dante had brought Yuna on their first real date 9 months ago. They'd walked along the boards, eating ice cream, talking about art and music and dreams. He'd fallen in love with her laugh that night. Now he stood alone, watching the city lights reflect on the black water. His phone was in his pocket, Yuna's message still unanswered. He'd texted her only the location, nothing else. Headlights appeared in the parking lot behind him. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps approached slowly, hesitantly. Dante didn't turn around. "Dante." Her voice was small, broken. He finally turned to face her. Yuna stood 10 feet away, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She wore the same clothes from this morning, wrinkled now, like she'd been sitting in them for hours. The confident, radiant woman from the engagement party was gone. In her place stood someone hollowed out by guilt. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The news is saying Director Han was arrested, that you had evidence against him, that you knew about the raid." "I knew about everything." Yuna's breath caught. "Everything?" "A waiter at the restaurant during our engagement party slipped me a note. He overheard 2 undercover cops talking about the raid, about your involvement." Dante kept his voice flat, emotionless. "I've known for 3 days." Yuna's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto a wooden bench, her hands covering her face. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I visited your sister in Busan. She told me about the accident, the teenage boy, Director Han's blackmail." Yuna looked up sharply, fear and shame mingling in her eyes. "Sujin told you?" "She thought I was there to kill her, to kill you both." Dante walked closer, stopping a few feet from the bench. "She was terrified, but she told me the truth anyway. That's more than you ever did." "I wanted to tell you," Yuna's voice cracked. "Every single day I wanted to confess everything, but I was so scared. Scared of prison, scared of losing you, scared of what you'd do when you found out." "So you just kept betraying me instead." The words hit her like a slap. She flinched, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. I know there's no excuse. I gave them your security schedules, your warehouse locations, details about your operations. I told myself I had no choice, but that's a lie. There's always a choice. I was just too cowardly to make the right one." Dante said nothing. He watched her cry, feeling the war inside his own chest. Part of him wanted to comfort her, another part wanted to walk away and never look back. "When did you plan to stop, or were you going to let Director Han destroy me completely?" Yuna shook her head helplessly. "I didn't have a plan. I was just surviving day to day, hating myself more each morning. Sometimes I thought about telling you everything. Other times I thought about disappearing, running away before you got hurt. But you never did either." "No." Her voice was barely audible. "I was a coward. I'm still a coward." She reached down and slowly pulled the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the moonlight as she held it out toward him. "I understand if you want me gone, if you never want to see me again. I deserve worse than that for what I did." Her hand trembled. "I love you, Dante. I know that sounds impossible after everything, but I love you, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." Dante stared at the ring in her palm. His entire life, betrayal meant death. No exceptions, no mercy. It was the foundation of his world, the rule that kept him alive. But looking at Yuna now, broken and honest for the first time since they'd met, he couldn't see an enemy. He saw a woman who'd made a terrible mistake years ago and had been paying for it ever since. He didn't take the ring. "If you could go back to that night 3 years ago, what would you do differently?" Yuna's answer came immediately, without hesitation. "I would have stopped the car, called for help, faced the consequences." She met his eyes. "Running was the worst decision I ever made. It poisoned everything that came after."
3 months had passed since Director Han's arrest. Seoul had changed. The corruption investigation had spread like wildfire through the police department, taking down dozens of officers. The new commissioner actually believed in justice, which made Dante's business more complicated. But he adapted, shifting money into legitimate investments, cleaning operations that had been dirty for decades. Minho stood at the entrance of the Lotus Garden, greeting guests with a confident smile. His new position as assistant manager came with triple his old salary. Dante had paid off his brother's medical bills completely, and the surgery had been successful. His brother was walking again, talking about returning to school in the fall. Once a month, Minho visited Dante at his office, sharing information from the restaurant. Important people still dined there, still talked too freely over expensive wine. But Dante never treated Minho like an employee. They sat together as equals, drinking tea, discussing life. "That waiter saved your life," Ji-sung had admitted one evening, months after everything settled. "If you'd walked into that raid unprepared, Director Han would have planted evidence you couldn't fight. You'd be rotting in prison now." Ji-sung still watched Yuna with suspicious eyes whenever she entered a room. He respected Dante's decision, but trust was another matter entirely. Some wounds never fully healed. As for Yuna, she had chosen to stay. That night on the pier, after Dante refused to take back the ring, they'd talked until sunrise. He explained that Director Han's arrest meant the blackmail evidence had disappeared. The hit-and-run case remained officially unsolved. She was free from that shadow forever. But freedom came with responsibility. Yuna had started therapy, working through years of guilt and trauma. She volunteered at a victim support center twice a week, helping others who carried similar burdens. She was rebuilding herself piece by piece, becoming someone she could respect. Their relationship had changed. Dante no longer shared details about his business. That part of his life stayed separate from her completely. They both understood why, and neither complained. Trust, once shattered, required careful reconstruction. One evening, Dante drove Yuna to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. She didn't understand where they were going until they parked outside. "This is their home," Dante said quietly. "The family of the boy you killed." Yuna's face went pale. Her hands gripped her knees, knuckles white. "I can't." "You can. You need to." She sat frozen for 10 minutes. Then she opened the door and walked toward the house on shaking legs. Dante followed at a distance, giving her space but staying close enough if she needed him. The boy's mother answered the door. She was small, tired, her hair streaked with gray. She looked at Yuna without recognition at first. Then understanding dawned, followed by something complicated. Pain, anger, exhaustion. Yuna confessed everything. She didn't make excuses or ask for forgiveness. She simply told the truth about that terrible night, about her cowardice, about the guilt that had consumed her ever since. She offered to help the family financially, to do anything that might ease their suffering. The mother cried. She didn't forgive Yuna. That would have been too much to ask. But she thanked her for finally providing answers after 3 years of agonizing questions. Not knowing had been its own kind of torture. They accepted help for the younger daughter's education fund. It wouldn't bring their son back. Nothing could. But it was a start towards something that might eventually resemble peace. 2 weeks later, Dante and Yuna stood on a beach in Jeju Island. The ceremony was small. Ji-sung attended grudgingly. Soo-jin cried happy tears. Minho brought his brother, both of them looking healthy and hopeful. No grand celebration, no dangerous men in expensive suits, just 2 imperfect people choosing each other despite everything. As the sun set over the water, Yuna asked the question that had haunted her for months. "Will you ever fully trust me again?" Dante considered the question carefully before answering. "I don't know, but I'm willing to try. That's more than I've given anyone in 20 years. She nodded, accepting his honesty.
They watched the waves together, facing an uncertain future side by side. Some stories end with perfect happiness. This one ended with something rarer, a second chance, a fragile hope. Two broken people who decided that redemption was worth the risk. And somewhere in Seoul, a waiter smiled, knowing that one small act of courage had changed everything.